Good morning everyone. In this video we are going to understand decorator function, and in the upcoming next video we are going to understand decorator class. But in order to understand decorator function we need to understand two concepts, that is first class functions and closure. And first class function and closure concept are explained in separate video, but I will explain the first class function and closure in this video as an overview. First class function is a function that will be returned as an argument to another variable, or first class functions can be passed as an argument to another functions, and first class function is a function that can be returned from a function. So this is the small definitions of the first class function. Now come to the closure. Closure concept says that it can keep an information within a function and remember it, and whenever we call our wrapper functions or an inside functions, that store memory will be used in our wrapper function or inner functions. So I'll just give an example for both of this concept. First class function. So let's understand a bit about first class functions. Suppose I have created a functions def show info and I have print. This is a show info function. So I've saved this file. Now I'll run the file. So this is a show info function. So what I have done here, I have created a function. I have given a statement that will print a message. So this is an example of first class functions. Similarly, I will show you the example of closure. So I'll copy this function. I will comment the first class functions. Now I will create an inner functions. Def inner function, and within the show info functions I will create a variable, as I said, that we will store an information greet welcome, and within the inner functions I will use that variable, and within the inner function I will accept an argument that could be the name. So I will use here name, and then I will close this function. So you can see here we are having one outer function which is named as show info, and within that function we have a variable greet which keep information welcome, and then we have created inner functions, and I will use the greet within the inner functions and a name which will be the argument for the inner functions, and we will return this inner functions. We have not used parenthesis because that will be the symbol for executions. We are not going to execute, we are just going to return the inner functions. Now we will call the show functions, and so we have called the show functions, and this show functions will return the inner functions, and this inner functions return will be stored into D. Now D is actually representing the inner function, and now we want to execute the inner functions, but D, which actually represents the inner functions, it accepts an argument, so we have to give some argument. We will use here as John. Now D will accept an argument John, and inner functions will print welcome John. Let's execute the functions welcome John. So you can see here the welcome, which is a variable which is stored into a variable greet, and this greet is defined in the outer functions, not the inner functions, and we are calling the inner functions. So this is a concept of closure, and for more detail you can watch another video of closure which is available within this channel. Okay, now come to our point, which is decorator. So let's understand first what is decorator. Decorator is actually a function that wrap another functions, and it will have some another instructions to be executed along with our original functions, or at the end you can see that your functions will execute but some other operation is also performing, and that will be done with the help of decorator. So it sounds a bit confusing, so let's go into the code and understand it in a better way. So let's first create a simple function def show, and we will give one simple print statement. This is a show functions, and now I'll just print it output of this functions. Now I am printing this functions. So this is a show functions. Okay, now what we will do, we will create a decorator functions, and as I said, decorator function will wrap and another function. That another function will be show in this case. So what we will do now, we will create a decorator functions here. So def decorator functions. So I'll use this decorator underscore func, and I will accept a functions as an argument in the decorator function. So I will just use a variable f. Okay, that will be the argument for these functions, and this argument is actually functions that we will pass. So we'll see a bit later how we can call these decorator functions. So within the decorator function, I will use a simple print statement, print decorator functions, and within this decorator functions we create and inner functions. So let's create our inner functions, def inner functions, and I will execute our function that is passed as an argument to our outer functions, which is decorator functions. So I will use this f, which is an argument. Just print a statement, inner functions has been executed successfully. Okay, now I will return our inner functions. So you can see here we have just returned the inner functions, we didn't call the inner functions. Okay, now what we will do, how we can call a functions, we can use decorator functions and we will pass an argument as a functions. So we will use here show, and we can store this decorator functions into a variable as d here. So what will happen when this line is executed, this decorator functions will execute, and this decorator functions will take an argument as so, and it will print this statement, and then it will just return this functions. It will not execute this inner functions. Run this functions. So you can see here this is a decorator function. So this line is executed, but you can see here the inner function has not executed till now. So how it will execute when we call the inner functions? Now d is actually resembling the inner functions. So once we call this d, the inner functions, so we are going to run these functions. So you can see here this is the decorator functions is executed. Now this is a show functions executed, and this statement is actually the show functions. This is the show function. So how it will execute it? So when we call this function, it will execute the inner functions, and this inner functions we call our f functions, and then it will print a print statement. So here you can see here that I am just using here d. We can use any variable here, so better we use a show variable. Okay, show, and I will comment this print statement. Now when this show functions will execute, it will execute the show function as well as this print statement. Whereas if you can see here, when we previously call this show functions, it will only execute this print statement. But now when we call this show function, it will execute that print statement as well as this print statement. So as I said, the decorator function is a function that will wrap the inner functions, and it will perform some other operations. So as I said, some other operations, the operation could be a print statement, or operation could be any kind of arithmetic operation. Let's see by executing our code. I have cleared the screen now, and now I will print the function. You can see here this is a show function, and inner function has been executed successfully. Okay, so this is the basic concept of decorator, but you have seen that decorator functions is a verb of functions with the statement at the rate. So we will go to show functions only, and we will give a decorator functions. You can see here it's a warning sign because it is not going to find out. So I have to cut these functions and provide above our show functions. Python is interpreter, so it need to know where it is defined when it is executing. Okay, so now what we'll do, now we can just comment these sections, and I will simply call the show functions here. Okay, so let's go and print this function. So you can see here this is a show function, and inner function has been executed successfully. So this is what we were expecting. Now we will use these decorator functions, and we can attach these decorator functions to our another function. So let's create another function as display with an argument name, and I will use the print statement display functions argument name. So we were expecting that this decorator function will apply for both this show functions as well as display functions. So let's call it display. I'll call the name as Mike. Now I will try to run this file which is having two functions, show and display. First I'll clear the screen. So you can see here we got some error as takes 0 position argument but 1 was given. Okay, in order to solve the problem, we have to pass the inner functions with args and keyword args, and this args and keyword arg will be accepted by our original functions, which is f as an argument args and dot keyword args. And now we will run this file. We will first save this one. So now you can see here this is a show functions and inner function has been executed successfully. This two statement comes from this show functions display function argument Mike, which is coming from this display functions, and inner functions which is coming from the decorator functions. You have observed that we can create our decorator functions, and within that decorator function we pass function as an argument and we return an inner functions after doing some more operations within our inner functions along with our original functions, and then we can use our decorator functions anywhere we want. So this is all for the decorator functions. I hope you like this video, and if you really like it, please hit on the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much.